Hello, and welcome to episode 208 of Quarkus Insights. Today, we've got a special guest, Eric, although actually, Eric is definitely in the not special guest category. He's a regular host as well as a regular guest, and he's going to be talking about a real world use case for Java and AI. So,
Hi.
welcome, Eric. Now that I've insulted you,
Yeah, I didn't even
welcome.
continue. Although I was thinking about it, yeah, and I didn't mention it. Usually, when I'm here as the guest, I get like the C-level crew as the host, like because you're never around, and Max is never around, and Demetrius isn't around, and Georgios. It's so we're like scrapping the barrel for somebody to host me.
Yeah, I mean there is a little bit of skeleton crew going on today because it's Pentecost holiday for a lot of our colleagues, but not for me and not for you.
Not for
So
me, not for you. Yep. And I
we
think
will hold
I
the fort.
this I think I got thrown in here as a pinch hitter at the last hour on Friday. So
Yeah,
because of that, we realized, oh, hey, wait, Monday's a holiday for some people.
including the people who are doing the realizing. See, that's when you know you love your job, is when you sort of don't notice that there's a holiday coming up.
Yeah. Oh, we have a holiday coming up next week, Juneteenth, which is a new holiday for us in the US. So it's like a random Thursday we get to be off. Cool.
Cool. So I guess let's get started. What are you going to talk about today?
So I'm going to talk a little bit about AI, and I kind of threw this topic out there because I'm doing this. So I help run the Boston Java Users Group, and I'm doing a lightning talk on this topic this week at our meetup. Which, just quick plug, we're actually going to start recording. And so I bought a whole bunch of equipment over the weekend. And
Oh,
it's interesting, for $85, I have a whole equipment where I can record through OBS Studio and I can broadcast to YouTube. Just
that's cool.
$85 worth of equipment. So, although part of it, I already own the phone, I already own the tripod. So I'm going to use my cell phone as a camera. And there's an app that you can buy that allows you to plug it right into OBS and stream from it. I bought like a capture card and then some wireless lapel mics, and
Oh,
so
cool.
probably not the highest quality, but I did a test run and it came out pretty good. So we're going to start posting those on our YouTube channel. So anyway, shameless
Excellent.
plug over.
Yeah, something for people to look out for.
Yeah, so I've been working on this. This it's not work related, but it's a little pet project because I've been trying to figure out like, and I don't think industry is quite there in the AI space, like being able to answer the question, if I change my model or I change my prompt or I change my application, did you get better or worse, like
Mm.
over time? So that's like kind of this question I've been chasing for a while, because there's so many pieces to that. Like the only way to really know is to be able to judge or score what you're doing, but you have to be able to do that historically, which means you have to be capturing questions and answers and knowing how good those questions and answers were over time in order to know if I change something, am I better
Mm.
or worse? Kind of like performance tuning, right?
Yeah.
You're not benchmarking, you're not capturing metrics over time, and you don't know if you get better or worse.
Well, I mean, it's even worse than performance tuning because at least with performance tuning, you usually have some idea of what good looks like. Whereas there's a lot of this stuff, if you knew the answer, you wouldn't need an AI solution to tell you the answer. So you're sort of
Yeah.
evaluating the unevaluatable.
Yeah, and so as part of that, I always struggle, kind of like developers struggle with naming things. I always struggle with coming up with a use case to figure something out. And so this use case kind of came out from it's more real world. So it came. If you want to throw my slides up
Yeah,
there, can start talking to it a little bit.
cool. Yeah.
So, and at the end, I've kind of got some like lessons learned or lessons currently being learned, like because this everything I'm about to talk about is still a work in progress. This thing isn't complete and it isn't done, so I'm just kind of chugging along and learning things as I go. Um, so yeah, so the problem I'm trying to solve. So this conversation came up at Easter about a month ago here in the U.S. And so my family member. So I live in New England in the U.S., which is pretty historical, but I guess when you're comparing to Europe, it's relatively new. Like
Yeah, it's all
history
relative.
goes, we're talking like 1600s and 1700s, not like BC and like
Yeah.
over in Europe. But for us, it's old. And so I have a family member who volunteers in the local towns for their historical society, right? And so they have like old buildings that looks like that. So this is a picture from old, and they've got a tons and tons of artifacts, right? So they've got cases, they've got a whole building that they just renovated, and they've got tons and tons of artifacts. So that's like one room. This is kind of the upstairs, tons of artifacts. This is just from the wall. Nobody knows what any of these artifacts are.
Oh, wow.
Right. And so people come in and they do tours, and nobody knows what any of the stuff is. Right. So that's kind of the problem, is how do we figure out what all this stuff is and make it easy for people to, when they're touring or visiting, like, to know what the stuff is. Right.
Yeah.
So what we came up with, me being a technical person, what I came up with was, okay, well, what if you took a picture, right? And you can use, like, this is like a great use case for AI. What if you took a picture of it, you created like a Word doc or a Google Doc or something, put it out there, you created a QR code, and then you could throw the QR code, and then whoever's in there could just take a picture of it, and it would bring them to the doc, which was read only. And so they have like a description of what the thing was, right? And this is kind of like what we envisioned when I did a little MVP. Like, I took a picture of the auger, I fed it into ChatGPT, I told it I wanted a reference article, like on the web, like Wikipedia or something like Wikipedia, where you could go find more information about it. Just something short, simple. But there's hundreds of these things, right? And so they'd want a manifest of it as well, so that they could know, okay, what do we have? Like an inventory catalog. Like, here's the picture that I took. Here's kind of the categorization of it. Is it a tool? Is it a piece of clothing? Is it a weapon? Who knows? So you kind of have an idea of what it is, so that you can help where the reference is, the URL, what the URL to the document is, so that they could go hand edit it later if they wanted to, right? So, but there's a ton of non-functional requirements that go along with this. And one is that people that are managing this are not technical savvy at all, right? I didn't want to put a picture of a lot of old people, because it's not all old people, but they're not the most technically savvy people. And there's no infrastructure, right? So I can't like host it with a database somewhere, because it needs to be like self-maintainable. And there's also no money. So for infrastructure and hosting and whatnot, so they're not tech savvy people and no money for it. So my contribution to this is building the thing, as well as whatever the cost is for ChatGPT to do the initial batch, like, because we want to do it as like a batch. Like, you take all the pictures and you lay them out on a file system, and categorize them, and then just let the thing run, do everything, and then it's kind of done. And then you can run it as a one-off later on. But for now, we've got hundreds of these things.
What's the reason you went for Word documents rather than just web pages? Is it so that it can be edited post generation?
Oh, because the Historical Society has a Gmail account, and they have Google Drive, and it's free. So Word doc, they're all familiar with Word. So I decided Word doc and putting it to Google Drive rather than Google Doc, because people know Word, and they have Word on their computers, so they could like map the drive, and they could edit it after the fact if they wanted to. But it would be read only from the world. It would just be read only. So it would just bring up in the browser, because Google Docs can render Microsoft Word in a browser. So it just seemed like the path of least resistance, like for non-tech savvy people, and didn't cost any money. So those are kind of like the big constraints, is not tech savvy and no money. So like working everything around that. So the initial thought that they came up with when they started with this problem was, well, we've got Boy Scouts, Boy Scouts of America, and Boy Scouts who are doing their Eagle Scout, which is kind of like their last, the last thing before they like graduate or what. I wasn't a Boy Scout, so I don't know the whole process, but the Eagle Scout typically has to do like a year-long project in order to become an Eagle Scout. And generally they've done like building park benches or done things in the community. So the thought was, well, maybe we can find an Eagle Scout or two who, before we came up with this AI solution, that they can go through and do the research and write the documents. And I kind of said it like, that's like a lot of work. Like when you're talking about hundreds of artifacts and then having to go Google and create these documents. And so, me as the engineer was like, well, hey, everybody's saying AI is great. This could actually be a good solution for integrating AI. All right. And so, like I started to say, everything I'm about to talk about and show is a complete work in progress, because I started with one idea of how I want to do it, because part of it is I'm no expert either, and I wanted to learn some stuff and play around with some stuff. So you can think like, oh, I can completely over engineer this, right? Because I want to figure out how to do stuff. So of course I knew I wanted to start with Quarkus and LangChain for J, right? And so the initial design that I thought of, okay, so they'll take all these pictures, we'll lay them out on a file system, and we'll put folders, like, in each folder represents a category. So like tools or clothing or weapons or signs or whatever, they can make them up at whatever they want. And then to help with the AI, I thought they could put a file in there, like a description file that kind of gave more information about what that category meant. And that we would process, for each, we would kind of recursively process those folders in the documents. And if there wasn't a classification, they could just throw the files on the file system and we would find them. And then we'd ask it to describe, for each picture, describe it, return, we came up with a prompt, then create the Word document on the file system, store it up to Google Drive, create a sharing permission so that it was globally readable to anybody who had the link, then generate a QR code. And ChatGPT is actually pretty good about generating QR codes, so you can use ChatGPT for that.
Huh.
Yeah. And then adding it to a manifest. So I decided to, because there's no infrastructure, right? So store it as it's running, use like H2, an H2 database, just to store these records in memory, so that when it's all done, we can output as a spreadsheet this big manifest, and then we can store all the QR codes in the manifest, put the manifest out to Google Drive, share it with the admin, the people who are going to own it, and then put all the QR codes back on the file system and put them back in so that they can go and then print out all the QR codes and put them in all the places. So maybe they'll get an Eagle Scout to do the printing and whatnot. But a lot of the heavy work, I felt that this was something that could be pretty well automated. And so, of course, like I said, I want to learn about stuff, and so I can completely over-engineer because, like I said, I want to learn stuff. So one thing I didn't want to do is have to know, how do I create Word documents? How do I interact with Google Drive? MCP is the thing nowadays. So I wanted to, I want to write as least amount of code as possible to get and do it as fast as I can to get this thing to work, and do some experimentation and kind of do some learning. So I wanted to use MCP as much as possible to learn about how it works, try and figure out some best practices around it. Like if I can start to see, hey, this really works really well, or it doesn't work really well, I can start to put that together. So I took my solution here and I decided, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to use MCP to read from the file system because I don't want to bother with that, right? And then I have like one overarching model that's kind of like a mixture of experts model, which has like the main prompt, and all these MCP things get exposed as tools to it. So then I'm going to use LangChain for J. So that'll be my own code to just, with my own prompts to describe the image. Yeah, I'll use MCP to create the Word docs. I'll use MCP to store them. I'll use MCP to create the links and sharing permissions. The QR code, I'll write the prompt myself, and I'll do that with LangChain for J and Quarkus. Adding it to my manifest, it's pretty easy to create a Quarkus repository and expose it as a tool, and write it to the database. That'll just be in memory while this thing runs, and then I'll use MCP to output that, expose that as a tool, and then use MCP to interact with the file system. Right. So that was my grand level architecture, my thought process and idea. Right. And so what could possibly go wrong with that architecture? And so I've started to learn a little bit as I've been playing with this. So some of this is implemented and some of it's not, and I've had to pivot a bit. So reading from the file system with MCP just did not work the way I did, or I couldn't figure out the right prompting or how any of that works. So I ended up writing my own code to do that, because I wanted to do like the categorization and reading the file and storing. Like it ended up I needed control over the process of how it worked, because it was so non-determined. Sometimes it worked, sometimes even with ChatGPT, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And this was kind of like the important part. If you didn't get this right, then everything else was garbage. Right. So the description, having it describe the image, that works pretty well. I ended up having to scrap creating the document and writing it myself in using Apache POI. which I had my code assistant do for me. So I didn't actually have to do a lot of work, and it came out pretty good. Because again, sometimes it did it the way I wanted to do. I wanted it to be consistent. Like I wanted each document to be have the same format, so it was consistent. Like I wanted the original picture at the top, then I wanted a paragraph. Like I wanted it like 3 or 4 sentences max. And you know, AI is very verbose. So have that, and then like have it structured in the right way. So again, maybe it could be if I tune the prompt better or spent more time with that, it may work. And sometimes it did, and sometimes it didn't. But I just decided at that point, after like 2 days of working with prompts, I was like, in an hour, I could write the code.
Yeah.
Or have my AI assistant in my IDE write the code for me, and then I can test it and maintain it. So I ended up going that route. So the Google Drive stuff, I'm still kind of playing with. I kind of have it somewhat working. So, you know, uploading to Google Drive and creating the folders and doing the sharing permissions, that's still work in progress. So I haven't quite decided what the right solution there is. Generating the QR code is pretty easy. I just, you know, use LangChain4j to do that. So that's my own code. My own code for, you know, the exposing a method to my repository to create records is pretty easy. So that was my own code. I haven't gotten to storing the manifest. I haven't gotten to writing out the manifest yet. I haven't gotten that far. So hopefully I can use MCP for that. So it's kind of, you know, some of the stuff has worked the way I wanted it to. Some of the stuff I've had to switch gears and switch around. And I'll go in, and when I start talking about some lessons learned, I'll show code and whatnot. It's all on GitHub, so anybody who wants to play with it or look at it is free to do that.
The QR code one is interesting because I would have thought it would be about the same amount of code to sort of run it up to LangChain4j as it would just be to like invoke Zebra Crossing or one of the other libraries, and that it would be more cost effective to do it by code. But
maybe, I mean, Quarkus makes it pretty easy to work with it to do image description and image generation.
Yeah,
it's just it's an interface with some annotations. So like I didn't actually write any code to do it, and I didn't have to integrate any libraries I don't know anything about. Sure, it probably costs more, but again, hey, I wanted to play. Like I completely over-engineered this thing. So what am I learning from this? So like I said, this is work in progress, and these are in no particular order whatsoever of importance or anything like that. So the first one is keep your arguments concise. And what I mean by that, so if I go show some code here, so I've got say my image describer here, make this bigger. So you can see I've got lots of commented out prompts. Like I've been playing with prompts here, but when I get into like encapsulating data that's related to each other that I want to expose as part of my prompt, being like encapsulation, I think is what I'm driving at here, like encapsulating your data and offering it to the LLM in ways that it makes sense, like from a categorization perspective, I think is important. Because just putting random stuff in there, I feel like it starts to go off the rails pretty quick. So like, you know, I've got lots of arguments in here, and I've got image URLs and descriptions and paths and whatnot. So keeping it concise and keeping it organized has been helpful. Like, don't just give it like in LangChain4j, you can create these methods and put whatever parameters you want and then reference them in the template. Encapsulating the ones that are related to each other, kind of like you would make a good object or domain model, I guess, has been helpful. Not exposing your, like, you can create tools and you can have like one AI service and you can expose all your tools, but the more tools you give an AI service, the more it's apt to go off the rails, I've found. So creating even if you're talking to the same model, creating multiple services or multiple methods within the same service with different tools that are available based on what you're trying to do has been helpful. So yeah, so that's the keeping concise part. The next one, and then I'll work through the code. This was a key one that it's got me into trouble, and I couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. So one of my tools here, when I want to add it to the manifest, right, is just a Panache repository, right? So I have the Panache repository has a persist method that is for creating or updating stuff. Originally, I just overrode that and exposed it as a tool, and that don't do that. Right? Create specialized methods that target what you want to do and describe them. Like having like very good English descriptions of the things has been helpful. So creating an artifact, and originally I had my entity, my JPA entity class. Where is it here? So I have a JPA entity class called artifact. Where is it? Which is kind of like my main domain model. And so originally I had this as the argument to my tool method, but because I'm creating new ones and it has this ID, right, which you don't have when you create new ones, if it's your argument, ChatGPT will just create some ID that's some long that because it wants to fulfill the structure of the Pojo, right? So that ran into a lot of problems because it was creating like giving random IDs, and so then it was like overriding each as I was doing hundreds of these, like it was overriding them or not creating them or creating them that they were like floats or UUIDs, and I ran into lots of issues there. So the kind of the lesson learned here is create a record that represents just the data that you want to persist, right? And then I'm using map struct, so I can use so as I you would start to think, oh, I've got a Pojo that looks like this, and then I have a record that looks exactly like this, and it seems like that would be a pain in the butt to keep up to date. But if you use something like map struct, where you don't actually have to write the mapping code, and as long as your attributes line up, it's just kind of like magic, and it does it for you. So that's a big time saver. So that was kind of one lesson learned is, especially when you're creating new things that have like keys, don't put them in the argument list of the thing you want to create if it's auto-generated, because the LLM, either that or you'd have to put code in here to wipe it out. And to me, that just feels, I'd rather encapsulate. So I find like I've got lots more objects and records, like lots of records hanging around that have very specific functions that if I was building a non-AI app, I probably wouldn't have. So I've created a lot of these records. And be descriptive. So like in my record here, the more descriptive you can be, especially with like the LangChain for J annotations, like the naming conventions of your attributes really do matter. But if you can be even more descriptive with the description annotation, where you can describe in like a sentence or something what this argument actually means, that gets sent to the LLM as part of the prompt, because when you tell it what tools you have available, these things are in there. And so they describe what these attributes actually are. And I can show it when I do the prompt. I can't promise that it's not going to blow up or that it'll actually work the way I want it to work. But like I said, it's still work in progress here. So yeah, so that was another lesson learned here. Yeah, be overly descriptive, like more so. Like I know naming is hard for developers, right? We always like parameters named X or A or B or I. It just doesn't work. You need to be descriptive. I found MCP is like the Wild West. Like there's just so much out there and you have no idea. Like, are you bringing Trojan horses in? Some of them work great. Some of them don't. Like the file system one I started playing with was the one from Model Context Protocol.io. They have a file system MCP server. So originally when I started using that to read it, I don't know, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. I don't know. I get scared whenever my code just starts, execing NPM stuff. It just feels wrong to me as a Java developer and as a security practitioner, right? So it's kind of like the Wild West. There's lots of useful stuff out there, but if it's not from a known source, like how much can you actually trust it? The Google Drive one's actually been pretty interesting. I found a thing it's free from Pipedream. So it's like a managed service that you connect with your Google account. So it uses SSE. So it's not like a local MCP server. So that's what I've been playing with to do all the Google Drive interaction. And I'm still playing with the prompts, trying to get it to work the right way. And I've also found like the single responsibility principle, like that you would follow in software engineering, really works well when you start talking about LLMs. Because originally I started like in my prompt, you can kind of see my history of prompts here, like having this big, huge prompt to tell it to do stuff. And finally I was like, you know what, this isn't the right way to do it. Let's break it down, you kind of give the main kind of mixed model of experts the system message of these are all the things that you can do and that I want you to do, and here's the order that I want you to do them in. But by the way, you've got some tools here. Here's this tool. I've got, when I created my Apache POI thing, I have another tool which knows how to create Word docs. And then I have another tool which knows how to upload to Google Drive. And oh, by the way, this is another AI service, right? So now I'm starting to chain my tools together, being able to make sure that these tools do one thing and they do one thing well. I found like trying to get it like one big prompt that does like a workflow just didn't work. Like do this, then take the result of that and do that, and then take the result of that and do that. It didn't work well. So this is still kind of a work in progress here. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but. And then guardrailing. So guardrail, like when this thing expects JSON as an output, making sure to guardrail that, hey, it's actually parsable JSON and it's parsable in the format that you expect it to be. So Quarkus LangChain4j has that built in. It'll be an upstream LangChain4j soon. Again, be descriptive, like add this description annotation all over the place. I found that to be super helpful. Like just giving extra description. The more descriptive you can be, the better. Let's see, what's the next lesson I learned here? Yeah, the model matters. Which model you use really does matter, because I tried to use, I didn't want to spend all my money, so I wanted to play with a llama. So using like the llama models or some of the other, like the Quen models, I played with anything that I could run on my local machine was awful in comparison to like Mistral or Claude or ChatGPT. I found for what I'm doing, ChatGPT has been the best. Like the GPT-4.1 model has been the best. It's also the most expensive. So I found so far in this workflow, like if you go back to the whole workflow, if you like per image, like for creating the description and creating the QR code and all that, I can do 3 to 4 images for a penny, which in the grand scheme of things, to spend $3 or $4 to do all this is pretty cheap. Seeing as though the effort is in the taking the picture, like the classification is the hard part, and to be able to do it in 45 seconds and cost $3 is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, even if you got an Eagle Scout, you'd probably have to spend that just in cookies to keep the Eagle Scout happy.
Oh, you can't get cookies for $3 or $4 these days, because then you need a bottle of water, or a glass of milk, right? And so that milk is going to cost you $2.50. So yeah, the model really matters, and like playing with the model, and like I said, this kind of goes with being overly descriptive. Tell the model what's going on. So like in your tool calls, so when you have your tool calls here, like in the artifact repository, like actually returning something that actually happened, like good or bad. I've got, where's my other tool here? My yeah, so like error handling. So when errors occur, especially if it's part of a tool call, telling the tool or returning something that says, hey, this didn't work because of X, Y, and Z things, rather than just assuming it worked completely, because then the model just says, oh yeah, that was good. I'm going to keep going. But if you tell it to error out or to stop if there's any errors, and then telling it like what your errors look like describing your error process. So as you're trying to chain these things together was helpful. And part of that, the other thing that I built was, and I haven't completely built it out yet, but auditing and error handling is like a whole nother thing. So the way I decided to do error handling is, rather than capturing errors like when they happen, especially like when reading the file system and whatnot, rather than handling them there, I use the way Quarkus, you can do event publishing. So you can like create an event and then publish it. So I have one, where is it here? Thing called error handler, and I have an error event that I publish. So right now I'm just logging it to the file system, but if I wanted to be able to handle an error at some point in the processing pipeline, I could store it in the database, or I could do whatever I want, because I've captured it, and it's synchronous. So it's not async, it's all synchronous. So I could capture the errors. That's still being built out. Same with auditing, creating. So this kind of goes back to did I get better or worse? Like I need a way to track over time. And I haven't built it out yet, but Quarkus Langchain4j exposes all these events as they happen. So, before it creates the initial AI service, or when an interaction with the LLM completes, or if the interaction fails, or whenever a response for the LLM comes back, or whenever a tool gets executed, or guardrails get executed, being able to, I haven't come up with a database schema. I'm thinking I'm going to track that in a database, so that as part of like when an LLM interaction completes, I have access to what the user and system message was. I have access to what the result was. I can store that. And then I could go back in time, like as part of a batch process, and I could run a judging algorithm or scoring algorithm against the requests and responses and figure out and kind of score them over time. And then that way I kind of have a history of, I know how good I was. So if now I change something at some point in time, I can rerun that process and I can go back and say, did I get better or worse? So that's kind of like the under the hoods of what I'm trying to accomplish with this whole thing, is build out that story of, did I get better or worse over time, but using like a real world problem that I'm helping solve as part of this. Let's see, what's the next lesson learned? Yeah, testing this is very hard, right? I have a whole nother talk about testing non-deterministic things. So right now there's not a whole lot of testing going on, other than you've seen all my commenting stuff out. I'm not following a test-driven development approach, which is what I usually do. So testing is hard. We can have a whole conversation about testing. And then kind of the question of the talk, could I have done this faster without involving AI at all? Probably at this point, right?
I have to say, I was wondering when I was looking at some of the super explicit text, I was like, I think you've just made more work.
Yeah. So could I have done everything that I'm doing, just writing my own code and forgetting about AI? Probably. The going out to ChatGPT to have it describe stuff, that I probably couldn't have done. So I probably needed AI for that. The creating QR codes, like you said, there's libraries for that I could have used instead. Google Drive, there's a Java API for all the Google Drive interactions that I'm pretty close to starting to investigate, because I'm still kind of stuck on the MCP part of it. So I've been working on this like off and on about a month and a half now, and I don't have a complete solution yet. So could I have done it faster? Probably.
And I guess one of the more sophisticated bits is that sort of overall architecture and orchestration, which you've also done a lot of the heavy lifting for.
Yeah. So if I kind of show I can kind of run this and show what I've got. So I've only kind of got one image here. So, and I've just put it on the class path for now. I have this folder, images, and then a tool folder. I've got a description file, nothing. And then I've got a picture of whatever this thing is, right? And so if I run this, did I use AI to come up with my solution? No, I actually came up with the solution on my own. Because again, I'm a software engineer. I can totally over-engineer this. Plus, I want to play with it. I want to be able to experiment. I haven't really experimented too much with MCP, so I wanted to experiment with it. So I felt it was a good use case to experiment with, because you could do it simple. You could completely go off the rails, which is what I've done, to try and come up with some of these practices, these lessons learned that I've found helpful as well. Because everything now is like Hello World or the chat bot, or nothing that's involved or like involves workflow or timing, or things have to happen in a certain order, which is what really goes on in industry, right? So
yeah, and then also the sort of fiddlier APIs that aren't necessarily super well designed, and so then interacting with those is less easy.
Yeah, so I've done it just as a command line app. I started using Pickly, but I was like, oh, this is overkill for what I need, because I don't really need any options. I want to run it as a batch process. And I figured I would build a REST API at some point if I wanted to do like a one-off, like upload one file and have it process one file. But for now, they're going to have like 600, 700 pictures that they're going to lay out on a file system and categorize using folders. So I tried to keep it as simple and easy for non-tech savvy people to be able to organize. Is it the best solution? Probably not. I could probably do a nice UI and React, but now total overkill for, because the main user is never gonna, like, it's gonna have to be someone like me who runs this thing, or I roped my son into this. Like, we kind of, I don't know if you can see, I've got a whiteboard over here where we kind of put together our algorithm here, like how we wanted to do it. I don't know if you can read it or see it, but
I can see it. I can't read it. Actually, hang on. Let me fix that. We can make it bigger. We have the technology. Cool.
Yeah. So like, so this is like sitting behind my desk here. So my son and I spend a couple hours like whiteboarding, like drawing pictures and whiteboarding a solution and how we thought this might work. Of course, I'm the one driving it because he doesn't know what MCP or any of this stuff is, but I'm trying to get him involved in engineering. So he's 15. So we started doing some of this together. So my main kind of class, I tried to keep it as simple as possible. I ended up writing the thing that goes and reads from the file system, right, to read the files and populate. So I create I didn't want to have keeping performance in mind. I didn't want to have to like read through the file system for each file, then start invoking all the AI and all that stuff while the file system handle is open, because stuff can go bad. So I wanted to read all the stuff on the file system, dump it in the database, and then now I can iterate through the database and do all my AI stuff for each record. And I'm just using H2 just as an in-memory. But anyway, with Quarkus, I could use Postgres or can use a dev service, but H2 is fine for what I'm doing. It's very low volume, in terms of requests, but reading file system, dump it into the database, and then go through the database, and for each thing, sort them, process them, and then print out all the info when I'm done. So maybe I can run this. Maybe it'll work.
While you're bringing that up, what was the reason that you had that sort of initial categorization into the 4 categories on Google Drive? Was that just to sort of help the AI, or was it just to help people kind of have a smaller volume of
I think
images?
both. So it was my screenshot only had 4, but they can invent them whatever they want, because I felt that where's my AI service here? I felt that if I could say, hey, this image is categorized as a tool which has some description, it could help influence the AI. And hey, you don't have to think about clothing or hammers, or it's some kind of tool, like narrow down your realm of things. And they don't have to categorize it if they don't want to, and they don't have to provide a description if they don't want to. But it was, like I said, kind of going back to the more verbose and the more information you can give it, the better the results are. So that's what the categorization is, more so that they could organize it and to help with the prompting. So kind of my prompt now. So this is kind of like the main model. Your service, which helps identify historical objects from a picture. You should create, there's a bug, create a description, 4 sentences max of an image. Description should be simple enough for an 11-year-old child. So I started with a 6th grader, and it didn't know what a 6th grader is, because I guess school systems, and I'm in the US, and so I said middle schooler, and so middle school I guess doesn't exist over there, and I started getting some really weird results. So I got very specific, and if an 11-year-old can't understand this, then you didn't do a good job.
I'm so interested by that, because I would have thought there would have been such a lot of training data in it, that's been previously ingested from exactly your cultural context, so that you wouldn't have had to worry about that.
Yeah, so I had to go age specific. Like, it should be simple enough for an 11-year-old. Please include the era of where the thing was. Like, was it in the 1800s or the 1700s in the description? Please find a reference on a website like Wikipedia and return a URL to it. Please include the URL as text in a separate paragraph, blah, blah, blah. Once you have that, so this is kind of like the flow. Create a Word doc located here with the following instruction, with the following information. The original image, I want the original image in it. The description that it returned, and if it found a URL, the URL, please, and then make it a clickable hyperlink, because it was just putting it in the doc. When you type in Google Docs and you can enter it, auto links, and you're doing it programmatically, that doesn't happen. You have to do that. And then once the document's been created, don't ask for confirmation, because some of the MCP servers say, are you really sure? Are you really sure? Like, just do it. Upload it. this document to the Google Drive folder inside some folder, add a global sharing permission, and save the artifact details. Here's where the file is, and here's where the output should be. And you can see I iterated on that quite a bit. I don't like to throw things away, even with source history. I like to have my history right there of what I've tried and what I haven't. So that was my main prompt. And then it had access to tools. So my tool for creating the record in the database saves, and that's not right, saves an artifact to the database, creates a new record. So that's that tool. I originally started with MCP for creating the document, and it was just wildly not right. So I used Apache. There's a Quarkus extension for Apache POI, and I used JetBrains, the JetBrains AI. I had it just told it what I wanted it to do, and it created this class for me. I made it into separate methods, but it basically created it, and I just tidied it up. So using the Apache POI library to do this. Yeah. So then when it adds the image, right, you have to add the URL, and so you have to do all that. So it's not a whole lot of code, and I didn't write it. So, but now I can test it. Right? I can write tests for it. And then the other AI for uploading to Google Drive, I'm still playing with this one. Server that knows how to interact with Google Drive. You have access to many tools. You can upload files, blah, 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 perform these operations. And then this is using the Quarkus MCP extension. So this is a tool, and it has guardrails. But I found, you'll notice, like, I've got lots of records that live alongside these that represent, I'm trying to like encapsulate the data because I want it to only do what I want it to do. If I give it like a larger object that I want it to fill in, it doesn't do as good of a job versus if I just tell it return this structure, and then I use my own code to merge stuff together after the fact. Right. And then, yeah, I've got some, and then, so memory is interesting because I'm running this as a command line app. Each AI service by default is request scoped, right? But because I want it to run each image, I want the history, the memory between all these different AI services. I want it to have the history, right? And then when I go on to the next image, I want to clear the history and start over. So I wanted an application scoped instance of because there's no such thing as per item scope, right? I could have invented my own CDI scope, but I didn't want to go that deep. So
and you call yourself an over engineer.
No, right. So I created my own chat memory provider that was like per image, per file scoped. And I created, just using internal memory, like an internal map. But now I can use a memory ID, right? And then I have this as a bean. So at the end of my workflow, at the end of each loop, I can just clear it. I can tell it to clear the chat memory. So now when I start processing the new file, it creates a new chat memory. So as it goes for all the different AI services, it has the history of all the interactions between all the different MCP services and tools and all that stuff. And I'm even sharing the memory ID. So from like this tool, but from the main one to, I don't need it there. But then when I go to the other AI service, there's a tool memory ID, which is the same as the memory ID. So I'm sharing the memory between my LLMs. That was another thing I ran into, is like, now when this tool gets uploaded, it doesn't know what the other tool did, which sometimes is probably a good thing, but in this case, it's not. I wanted to be able to share the memory. Yeah, and then I just have some configuration, like where stuff is in the file system. Do I want to clean the output directory when I start up? Where the Google Drive folder, simple things. I've got JPA repository, my map struct mapping, and error handler, my document creator. And so I can run this. As you can see, I don't know, I can't promise it's actually going to do the right thing. So now it's into the MCP, so you can kind of see what it, I don't know if you can see.
I was going to say, it's very optimistic to say we can see. It's, right.
You made me change my color scheme last minute, and I'll highlight it. Here, I'll grab the whole thing and I'll go to like Notepad or something. Let's wait for it to finish. Did it finish? Nope, it's still doing stuff.
How many images is it processing?
Just one. Just one. So did it do it? Target, docs. So the output, the way I've got it is it will put it in a category that's the same as the category that the input, and the file name will be exactly the same as the input image docx, right? So now if I open that document, and I don't have Microsoft Word on my laptop, so it's going to open in, I don't even know what. Bring this over. Boop. Oh, and that's tiny. Make that a little bigger. Hang on, let's see if I can zoom this. So
is that a dog that's just...
It is a dog, yeah. Somebody's outside. He's like, she's huffing and puffing. She thinks she's a big shot. Yeah, so this is what it created. Here's the original image. Here's the description. Here's the category. Here's the reference, and then here's a link to Wikipedia where you can read more about it. And this is clickable.
That's really cool.
Should be clickable. So if I go here, I don't know why it's not clickable. Probably because this is just like Notepad. I don't have Word. And if I go to the URL, kind of looks like what it was. It looks similar, right? From the original thing.
Yeah, yours is sort of a bit more spirally, but that seems consistent with it being drilly.
Yeah, so this one here, this one kind of looks like it.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the other thing for the Boy Scout is they need to go through and read all these things and make sure, is it actually right? So yeah, whether or not it got out to, yeah, so it finished. I can copy I'll go to like Notepad or something. Where'd Sublime go? Where did it go? I think it's like hidden behind all my windows here somewhere. Oh, I'll just create a Word doc. I'll paste this in. Eagle Scout driven development. Yeah, and I'll make this bigger, don't worry. I don't know what's going on. It's like frozen, trying to paste. All right. So maybe you can see it now that it's highlighted.
Yeah, yeah.
So we go back up to the top. Actually, it's gone past my history because there's a lot of log. I have like debug logging turned on. So you can start to see like the MCP server has all these tools that it exposed for accessing Google Drive. There's lots of tools. And here's a response, chat completion, find the folder, because I wanted to find, so it's looking for the folder. So you can start to see there's like lots and lots of back and forths here when you start talking about like Google Drive. So here I'm using Pipe Dream, putting stuff, copy files. So yeah, there's lots of stuff here. Let's see if it actually worked. Did it? Because that's the key thing. So did it actually work? Oh, here's a folder. There's nothing in it.
Oh.
It created the folder, but it didn't put the file there yet. So it's still work in progress. So yeah.
Oh, and Kevin's got an awesome pun, which is Eagle Scoot.
Eagle Scoot driven development. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's really it. So the code, like if you scan the QR code, that's where the repo is. It's just in my GitHub repo. These slides, not that there's anything important in them, is there too. So yeah. So that's kind of what I've been doing in my spare time and trying to help the community as well as learn.
That's really cool. It's so interesting. I think when you sort of go past the kind of the standard scenarios that a lot of the sample apps are, and of course those scenarios work really well. And then once you sort of go off it, it's interesting to see, well, how much of it still just works really well, and how much do I hit rough edges and have to come up with strategies like don't do this, be more descriptive here,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Like I
Yeah, I
said,
think
I mean, I've been in software engineering for 26, 27 years. I probably could have been done with this if I had just written all the code myself. But part of it is learning and experimenting and seeing how some of this stuff works. So I'll probably eventually have to go back and have like alternate implementations that are driven by config. Of course, you know, in computer science, you can do everything with adding a layer of indirection, right? So I probably add a layer of indirection where I can configure, do I want MCP or do I want my own code through a property or something? So that way because eventually I have to get it to work because they're waiting for this. Like, it's great that I want to learn, but they're like waiting for me to finish this so that they can put their QR codes out. So at some point I just have to get it to work.
yeah.
But then as things evolve, I mean, I started working on this a month ago, and what's there in MCP now compared to a month ago is insane. Like the pace at which this stuff moves is insane. So what I write now, in a month from now, I could replace and be done with it. So I guess that's another lesson learned is
Yeah.
it moves so fast.
Yeah, which does make it hard, doesn't it? Because like change is good, but you have other things that you want to be doing than just like continually refactoring this to sort of keep up with progress.
Yeah. So yeah, so I guess if there are any questions, happy to answer them. The code is all on my GitHub repo. Can't really see the URL, but
And I'll paste a link to the URL into the
yeah, I'll put it in our private chat here, and you can throw it out.
Cool. That's more effective than me trying to take a picture of it and then paste it in, which is what I was doing.
Yeah. So I mean, there's no documentation, like a complete work in progress at this point. So yeah, the only thing you need is an API key for Google Drive. Or you'll need, if you're going to write the code yourself for Google Drive, you need some way to authenticate with Google Drive. I'm using PipeDream, so I have a PipeDream account, and I've got my Google account synced with PipeDream, so that's how that's working.
What's
and then
PipeDream?
OpenAI. PipeDream is when I was just Googling MCP, Google Drive MCP servers, it's like an automation AI thing, but they provide, if I were to sign into it, you can build like agents. It's like an agentic platform. I don't know a whole lot about it. It was free and it worked. And yeah, it's in here somewhere. I don't remember exactly, but I've got something in here where it exposes Google Drive commands as an MCP. So I point to this, and it has my Google account linked to it. So again, what bad things could happen there? There's a whole bunch of security questions that are unanswered. But so
yeah, really, really interesting. Thank you very much.
Yeah, happy to share.
Yeah, and we've got the links there, and yeah, perhaps we'll have you back on for an update once it's all finished and working end to end.
Yep. Yeah,
In
and
2
then
years.
then I can start building what I actually I'm interested in. the use case of, did I get better or worse?
Yeah.
That's the whole goal of this.
Yeah. Amazing. Cool.
So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad I could pinch hit.
Thank you. See you all.
Yeah, the other thing I don't know